Brian. How are you?
I'm great, Anna. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I read Candy Cane Kills Again to get in the early Christmas spirit, but it's 90 degrees outside.
Yep. It finally turned here in Arizona just this past week and dropped like 20 degrees. So it was in the 70s today, which is like finally some relief.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I think that we're going to be battling like 70s and 80s all until next week.
Ugh.
But, it's fine. Also, I have a question for you. When do you think is the best time to decorate for Christmas?
Oh, that's a good question.
And it's like very
Um,
controversial because like especially among like Halloween people, we like to leave our Halloween stuff out as long as possible.
I
But
know. I feel like, see, Thanksgiving to me is kind of a non-holiday. I don't really like
yeah.
it's a fine reason to like get together with friends and family and eat a lot of food, but like I don't really think of it as a real holiday. So to me, it's like it's between Halloween and Christmas. And so like
Yeah.
it's interesting this year now, Spirit Halloween is going to merge into Spirit
Yeah.
Christmas.
I
So
saw
they're
that.
kind of bridging the gap between these two holidays as well. I need to go and sell books there apparently. But yeah, I feel like it would be fun if you can just kind of make your decorations kind of slowly segue from the creepy Halloween into the Christmas, or just keep, my girlfriend has a black Christmas tree. You can just be creepy year
Oh
round.
yeah. I love that. That's a good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have like like you decorate for fall. And so I have like one little stuffed turkey that sits out for both Halloween and Thanksgiving and then for Christmas he's out. But that's about all I got for Thanksgiving. But we're supposed to be
That's
talking
good.
about your franchise and your book that has kind of blossomed in this last year. Candy Cane Kills and then Candy Cane Kills Again is coming out next week, I think, or is that the following? It's on the 12th, whenever that is. Time isn't real. How are you feeling with the
Nope.
upcoming
It's a
release
figment of
and
our imagination.
absolutely. How are you feeling about the upcoming release and like Candy Cane Kills was from where I'm sitting a huge success. So like walk me through what that was like.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been kind of surreal, when we first with Alan at Shortwave decided to commit to doing I was going to write like a Christmas themed book. We kind of knew that it was like a niche, but we kind of liked that idea of like, well,
Yeah.
every year there will be Christmas horror that people want. And it's an indie book, it's a novella. So I think expectations were kind of low, but gratefully, Alan does does such an amazing job, kind of
Yeah.
making every book really stand out as this special experience, especially within the Killer VHS series. Like that whole series has its own kind of energy and momentum to it. And Candy Cane was the second book, so it was part of the movement to like, hey, here are these books, here's the vibe. But it's definitely been really surreal to have this sequel coming out and feel a little bit less pressure because I kind of have written it for the folks who enjoyed the first book, and hopefully that um, it scratches that itch, and also, of course, hopefully it will attract people who haven't read the first book and be like, wait, what's this? What was the first one? And
Yeah.
yeah, but so far, gratefully, it's been a fun ride, even just a week from Pub Day. I can't believe it's actually happening next week, but
I know, it's crazy. And like I came to know you as a horror author through Candy Cane Kills. But for anybody who doesn't know you, like I've come to know you through Shortwave and Killer VHS, you have worked, I believe, like you've done screenwriting, right? And then you also have Curse of the Reaper, which I read this year and I absolutely loved. And I mean, you're just a horror writer. So in that sphere, it was really interesting, I think, to kind of know you as like the Candy Cane Kills guy and then just the rest of everything else. Because, like your slasher knowledge comes through so well, even in a short novella like Candy Cane Kills. It just like comes through so clearly. So I just think it's so impressive that you're able to put in the unique kills, the tropes and the themes and all that kind of good stuff. It's really fun.
thank you. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I worked for years as a screenwriter, and mostly have written like psychological thrillers, like Lifetime original movies, and an episode of Fuller House, which is a, a weird thing when people discover that and like, wait, what? Um, but it feels like in the writing world is where I've really been able, in the book world rather, to like delve into the like fully committed slasher vibes. And Curse the Reaper being my debut was a bit more psychological horror, meta horror about slashers. And so to then write Candy Cain Kills, I really knew going into that, I was like, this is going to be a slasher like through and through, and kind of just commit to that format that I love so much. And it was really fun. There were many moments in the writing of it that I kind of paused and was like reminded myself that like you can push this as far as you want, like just go for it. And certainly the sequel, that
Yeah.
was even more the case. But
That's like one of my talking points that I wrote down is like Brian's superpower to turn anything into a deadly weapon.
this is for me, that's the fun of writing a slasher. Like I don't think I would have fun writing a slasher where it's just a person with a knife stabbing people every time. I'm just kind of like, that's that's okay, but like Final Destination is my kind of inspiration of like how elaborate and creative and just utterly gruesome, but also comedic at times can we get. It's fun to play in that sandbox.
Oh no, it definitely comes through. And like I had Final Destination in mind whenever I was reading Candy Cain Kills Again because I was like, that's really creative. Like I'm just kind of like really impressed that you were able to pull that off. But I mean it works, both ways because you also write with an equal amount of heart. And it's kind of I've talked to you a little bit about this before, but it's like this moment or movement in horror where we're taking the slasher, which has been pretty, I don't want to say one-dimensional because there's plenty of layers to it when you sit with it, but at least in horror fiction, I feel like we're sitting with them longer and in more in depth. Do you feel the same way about like your writing and where we're at in time with the genre?
Yeah, it's really refreshing to feel like that's very much true. And it's interesting, like with Curse of the Reaper, that was originally a screenplay, and I was asked by producers to just like basically cut out all the character development and make it a straight up slasher. And I was like, that's boring to me. I love horror movies where you care about the characters and you're invested in them. And writing it as a book really gave me that opportunity and to continue to do so in the book format where you can really get into the characters' experiences in a much deeper way. And I think that horror readers are really they crave that. That's that point of connection for all of us in all art, I think, is just human connection. But I think horror is especially powerful because, we're going to these dark places that if we go by ourselves, it feels really scary and lonely. But, when you're in a book club or when you get to talk about these books with other people or get to talk to the writer about it, it becomes a much more kind of communal experience then.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I mean, it comes through very clearly in everything that you write, especially down to characterization. And so, I'm going to try and speak as like carefully as I can about Candy Cane Kills in case somebody hasn't read the first one. Like there's big reveals at the end of that one that
Right.
obviously bleed into the second one. But to start with the basics, just like the family unit that you created, the brother and sister dynamics, what was your like, I mean, this is kind of the blanket question, but your inspiration or just kind of like where you started to build this family that we end up caring so much about in, I mean, less than 150 pages?
Yeah, I that for me was also part of the kind of Christmas formula. That to me, sometimes people are like, why would you like that? Some people think that Christmas and horror is like a contrasting juxtaposition in some way. And I get that to a degree, but to me, Christmas is also a really stressful time when the family gets together and all the drama comes to the surface. And like, I was like, that's an easy recipe for horror. And so I knew that that was going to be kind of part of the Candy Cane recipe was delving into the family dynamics of both the family that's there and the family that used to be there. Um, and really making sure that people cared and were invested. I really didn't know with the first book. I'm a big outliner, so I knew every
Mhm.
scene and what was going to happen. But it wasn't until I started drafting that first book that I realized that I was going to jump into the other characters' POVs. I thought it was going to be
Yeah.
mostly Austin and he would be the POV character. But by the second or third chapter, like Fiona was like in my brain was just like, nope, it's my turn. I've got thoughts, I've got feelings. And I was like, you're right. And then the next chapter it was like, nope, Mom Dana's got thoughts and Dad Greg. And I was like, of course, this has to be told from everybody's perspective in order to get the pain of the miscommunications that are happening in that family are what were central to me. And so to be able to get it from each of their perspectives and understand, to me, pulls you in deeper to that kind of strife.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Fiona, she's got to be my favorite. And like especially in Candy Cane Kills Again, I don't know, I can't really remember if she gets more page time than before, but she's just so sassy and I just love it. Like you were talking about those like punchy one-liners that you have fun with in slashers, like she's got a few of them and I think that
Yeah.
they're great. She's so much fun. I was like fist pumping yesterday while I was reading.
I love that. That's the dream energy of just like being able to root for characters. And it's a tricky balance to. I'm definitely inspired by the Scream Kevin Williamson energy
Yeah.
of like clever punchy dialogue and all of that, and but always trying to find the balance to make sure it doesn't go too far that it feels like the characters are caricatures, but rather keep bringing it back and having just enough balance. And Fiona's definitely the character who like continued to just like have a life of her own on the page, and I just got to kind of follow along like, all right.
No, and I think I really love, and I hope that this isn't too much of a spoiler, but there is like a somewhat organized religion component. And like not even that the story is completely about that, but you kind of touch on ideas of like grandiosity and, control, manipulation, like all these different things and like kind of how it creates the situation that the whole family is dealing with first in Candy Cane Kills and then, later on in Candy Cane Kills Again. And like she was the most vocal one, and I just felt like so seen by some because like God, do I wish I could have said some of the things that she said. You know what I
Yeah, that's
mean?
definitely, yeah, I mean, that's the catharsis of writing for me.
Yes.
I grew up in a really repressive religious environment and school. Um, and I just was a quietly repressed boy.
Yeah.
And so for me, Fiona was kind of the mouthpiece as an adult now to be like, as you're saying, kind of, as you're suggesting, kind of like saying the things I wish I could have said then, and being a voice for all of that
Yeah.
was definitely cathartic for me.
I can imagine and I can relate, man. I mean, just like like I said, you just kind of touch on it. I mean, it is a bigger theme than Candy Cane Kills Again, but um it comes through very clearly and it's like it's almost like a horror story in and of itself, even if we didn't add the slasher component to it. And like that's something that I also talked to CJ Lead about with her book American Rapture. I'm like, the stuff that Sophie was going through in that story, I'm like, you can take away the horrible apocalypse, plague, whatever, and it would still function as a horror story. And I think the same can be said for parts of Candy Cane Kills. Again, it's very relatable. I think it's all
Yeah.
kind of something that we can, we'd be like, oh, we've been there and we wish that we could have handled that differently or said, X, Y, or Z. So,
Yeah, that's definitely something for me. Like the like character-driven drama has to come first, and this is something I talk about when I'm teaching writing as well. It's like I love genre elements like horror,
yeah.
sci-fi, fantasy, comedy. Like everything is it's so much fun to play in those genres, but you have to have the character-driven drama at the heart of that, and then you get to layer in the fun of the blood and the guts and the mayhem. Um, but yeah, that's and then as we were talking before we started recording, I'm like hosting screenings at
Yeah.
ASU where I work now, and we screened Talk to Me a few weeks ago, and that was one of the things we talked about afterwards was that it's it's really, especially rewatching it, I was realizing how much it's just like this character-driven drama that happens to
Yeah.
sprinkle the horror into weave it into the drama that's already there with these characters.
Yeah, particularly like Talk to Me. That was one that in the movie theater, like my shoulders were like in my ears the whole
Yeah.
entire time because it's just an assault on your senses the whole entire time. But like you said, like I feel like upon a rewatch, I mean, and I definitely picked up on the character stuff then, but it's just like so in your face with the trauma and the like. I don't know what word I can quite use to define it, but man, it is just in your face.
Yeah, it's tense. It's like you said, it's really in your body as you're watching. You're like, "Ooh."
Yeah. Yeah, my poor boyfriend. I brought him, or my fiance, I should say. I'm still not used to saying that. But But anyway, we went and he like kept looking at me and he's like, I don't understand why we come to these if you're gonna like have your hands over your ears the whole time. And I'm like, listen. And then Emily Hughes this year put out Horror for Weenies, and so now I have a good defense of like I am a weenie. I can love it, but I am a weenie. And I'm gonna want to see it while it's in theaters. I'll wait some of them I'll wait till they come home, but I'm
Yep.
gonna want to see it because it is so cathartic in the end. Like it's so relatable.
Yeah, it's different degrees of like dipping your toe in versus diving in. And also I know plenty of people who read horror but don't watch horror or
Yeah.
I think there's no kind of rules. It's just kind of like we're kind of feeling our way through the dark of like, is this spooky door? Am I okay with what's behind this one? Okay, let me try this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So anyway, to kind of bring it back to Candy Cane Kills again, one of the other hallmarks of slashers that you definitely hit upon is the idea of revenge and like what revenge can look like to those who have been wronged. Can you talk a little bit about, and again, I'm trying to avoid saying who it is and all that good stuff, but the revenge arc or the feelings of revenge that, are looking to be sought in Candy Cane Kills Again.
Yeah. It's tricky because it's as you're saying, like it's a novella, so the whole thing is a spoiler, but also the cover kind of
Yeah.
gives a certain vibe that you're like, I think I know what we're in for here. So
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely, the first book, the biggest, most obvious reference point for the first book was Black Christmas, which is
Right.
like, okay, Christmas themed slasher and the setup of a contained home where there's a killer kind of on the periphery, slowly working their way into the center of the story. Um, and for the sequel, I knew that I wanted to do something different. Like, I didn't want to do like 1 year later,
Yeah.
a new family and Candy Cane comes back. Like, no thanks. I knew that it was going to pick up immediately where book one left off. And the book one is Christmas Eve, book two is Christmas Day. And I knew that in that sort of Halloween 2 fashion.
Yeah.
And Halloween 2 all takes place in the hospital. And my pitch to Alan was like, well, this is all going to take place in the church. And my reference point is not Black Christmas now, it's The Crow. Um,
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
like it's going to be like the main story is going to be a revenge tale and have the kind of gothic religious energy wrapped around it as well. So it was really fun to, it's the trick of writing a sequel is like, how do you deliver the same but different, right? I don't
Yeah.
want it to be so far removed from the first book that it feels like it's not Candy King Kills anymore, but to give a totally different kind of plot energy and drive and perspective to the second book was really important for me to have more fun with it and hopefully for readers to have a different experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I kind of wanted to ask too, like I think it's in like your author's note, your acknowledgement, you said the sequel can't happen without the support. And so I imagine that the sequel wasn't thought of until the success of Candy Cane Kills. So what was it like to kind of like revisit and map? I'm assuming that you did that. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like to map out, like, did you have an idea before and you're like, oh, if the opportunity presents itself, we'll run with that? Or was it a total overhaul?
Yeah, so what I just said is pretty much all that I had at that point. So,
Yeah.
Alan had said, if it does well, maybe we can do a sequel, but we
Hmm.
weren't counting on it. And the second book kind of tees up what might happen next, or the first book, rather, the end of the first book, kind of tees up what could happen next in terms of heading to church. Um, but I really didn't know anything beyond that.
I
And
gotcha.
so when the first book was successful and Alan said, I'm down to do a sequel if you are, I was like, give me a minute to kind of plot this out and figure out what it would be. And that was when I started to kind of crack the plot. And it really wasn't until I cracked the ending, the final chapter, that I was like, okay, now I have to write this book and I have to work backwards from that ending to like earn it and build towards that ending because that to me like gave it the book a reason to exist.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I don't want to say anything about the ending other than it's incredibly emotional and moving. And I feel like it's very fitting for kind of the trend that we're seeing in horror. Like it's not I don't want to say it's not what you expect, but it's a different kind of ending that I was very happy to see.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings me to my next topic where I want to talk about the quote unquote like good for her horror. Because, this story, everything that you've written, kind of does deal with righting wrongs or revenge. And I mean, that's kind of like the nature of slashers. But it kind of dawned on me like earlier this year. I read Carrie for the first time and I watched it for the first time. And, like everybody was doing recap podcast episodes and essays and everything. And I was reading it, and like some people, it was like about whether it was good for her horror or not. And I just kind of sat back and I was like, man, this is just like a tragedy. This is just like good for her horror. I feel like maybe would look a little different in my eyes. And I'm kind of curious, like, on your thoughts on that kind of subgenre or that labeling, like, just like everything about it, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, Carrie, I think was definitely an unconscious, maybe a little conscious influence on Candy King Kills in terms of the mother and the kind of repressive upbringing.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there is more and more. I mean, we're talking on the eve of election day, so
Yeah.
obviously with all of the attempts to take rights away from women that are happening right now, I think it's understandable that there's a lot more of those stories that are rearing their heads right now. But I think there is a real kind of tragic sadness to it of like, you wish that the revenge didn't have to happen because you
Yeah.
wish the wrongs didn't happen. So
Right.
I think there's a kind of a duality to it, but I think that's where fiction can sometimes offer that catharsis that hopefully then inspires people in the going out into the real world to have more kind of motivation to support folks and to make better decisions in their real life to prevent those things from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting in general, just that the sort of revenge energy that I think people really can tap into because we all have a lot of anger
Yeah. Yeah.
right now, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and wrongs that we want to right. So yeah, that's definitely something I'm curious to see once the book is released. I've already gotten some really nice messages from readers, especially those who have grown up in repressive religious upbringings. That it's a cathartic experience on that front. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think, like you said, it's a lot of like untapped rage in general. Like whether it's and I feel like we're gendering it lately a lot, and I don't really
mm,
know what that's about, but it's like male or female, and like like the whole female rage thing. And I definitely have felt that reading things before. Like I read Rachel Yoder's like Night Bitch for the first time this year, and that was like so it's such a complex take on a lot of different things. But then whenever like you revisit the classic trope of like slashers and revenge, I think it's always interesting to like evaluate where we're at now and like where we've come and
yeah,
the reflection of like you said where we're at in the world right now. And so it makes a lot of sense, but it's something that's been on my mind recently, especially like having just read Carrie, and like I freaking love Carrie now. Like I talk to everybody
yeah,
about Carrie, I feel like, because it just hit so many notes for me. And so anytime I can pick up on a thread of Carrie in a book, I'm like, did you happen to think about that when you wrote it?
yeah. Yeah, it is interesting, that the like slashers, there's very few female slasher characters, and
Yeah.
like, and for me, like the big three of Jason, Freddy, Michael, like Freddy was a child killer, Michael was a sister killer, and Jason was just a little kid who drowned because counselors weren't paying attention. And Jason's my favorite slasher. Like I think because he has that tragic backstory of like, and there was the first movie was a female revenge tale. Sorry for spoilers, but Friday the
Oh no.
13th, the
No,
first movie, his mother is avenging his death, and then it turns out he wasn't dead. But what are you gonna do?
yeah.
But yeah, it definitely that sort of like, and that was another thing I really had fun with in these books is like outsiders coming to this small town and discovering there's this local legend that some people are trying to warn them about, and some people are like, no, 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 it's just a tall tale kind of thing. Like I just love that framing so much, and it's
Yeah.
part of that kind of classical kind of campfire tale element that slashers for me just do so well and have you can have so much fun with.
Yeah, and I think that there's a there's an easy communication about slashers that way. Like it's easy to share or to like discuss like what you love about them or like, it's just like such a easy subgenre of horror that, you can talk about the gnarly kills, how creative it is, now we're getting in this emotional component. We can talk about that too. And, I mean, however many sequels things run, that's always fun to be like, okay, what's going to come next, that kind of stuff. I find it's one of the most easily conversable topics of horror. I'm not sure if you've experienced the same thing, but it just seems like an even playing ground that everybody's like somewhat familiar with, and you can all talk about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's because the slashers to me of all the horror subgenres have their own story structure elements.
Yeah.
And I mean, Scream obviously comments on this in a big way. Um, but like body horror can be any type of story. Like cosmic
Hmm.
horror can have any structure, but like slashers, there's a story structure that you follow, including like opening kill and but yeah, and that to me I think is part of what makes them kind of a shared language in a different way than some of the other subgenres, probably.
Yeah. I like what you've done though, like with slashers, like between Curse of the Reaper, and then you've done it, even on the smaller scale with Candy Cane Kills and Candy Cane Kills. Again, you kind of subvert expectations a little bit with like endings. Like you still are hitting the high notes, but there's still something different about your writing with slashers that I feel like sets it apart from just another tried and true, guy with an axe or girl with an axe, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
thank you. No, I feel like I've realized that I can't do it any other way. Like even when I set out to write Candy Cain Kills, I think I thought that I was going to write something a little bit more just pure campy fun VHS vibes. And it is that, but also like as soon as I finished the first draft, I was like, oh man, I'm just unloading all of my religious family trauma into this little novella to carry the weight. Like, good thing I have a sequel to go even deeper into all of that. Because I think that's always the goal is to like, how can I do, scratch the itch and do the thing that I love and that people who love this genre love, but also add something a little different and put a little spin on it that gives something extra or unexpected in some way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the gift that forgive the pun, but it's like the gift that keeps on giving.
You
And I
know,
just hope that I did you proud
I
because
was just gonna
God,
say, you know,
there
I
are
could
so
never
many, so
begrudge a
many.
pun.
No, between I think I mean I just read like Curse of the Reaper like a month ago. I had it's gotta be so between that and then reading Candy Cane Kills Again, it's just so good. I literally like I sit back and I'm like, how in the hell did he come up with that? Like I say that about the violence and then also the puns. Like there is no in between.
It is like my main source of fun are those two things of like over the top kill scenes and punny word play. It's just that's the only reason to write.
And that is why I'll keep coming back for more. Um, and so I also want to take a minute and like we've talked plenty of movies. But what about books? Like I'm always super interested in like the convergence of like readership and writing for authors. Like whenever you write anything at all, it doesn't necessarily have to be Candy Cane Kills, but do you read certain things to like get you in the right frame of mind? And like was there a point of inspiration for Candy Cane Kill? Like all that good stuff.
That's a great question. I mean, I'm just reading all of my fellow amazing contemporary horror authors. It's absurd right
There's
now.
so many.
It's so hard to keep up, but that's such a good problem to have. I mean, on the slasher front, like obviously Stephen Graham Jones, Adam Caesar, just love what they're doing. And then, Nat Cassidy, Clay McLeod Chapman, Rachel Harrison. I mean, the list goes on and on forever. And there's no real rhyme or reason to what I'm reading versus when I'm writing.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's all so inspiring. And I think for Candy King Kills, I do remember something that I read right before it that I found really inspiring was Dark Harvest, which is it's a novella by Norman Partridge, and it has these kind of small town vibes and this slasher energy that was really inspiring to me. Um, but yeah, I think in general, it's for me, the process is like getting the story down in the first draft and then playing and having fun with the language and seeing if I can push the kill scenes a little bit further. Um, but it really is. I just can't say enough how grateful I am to be writing horror at a time when it is just filled with so many, not just amazing writers, but they're all largely just wonderful humans. And I do think, the catharsis of it all that we were talking about, I think that there is a correlative element
Oh
to
yeah.
that. I think that when we work out our darkness on the page, either as a writer or a reader, we get to be more cheerful. So yeah,
I can see that. I can certainly see that. Yeah. I mean, and it's always like, everybody's, oh, horror's back or whatever. I'm like, yeah, horror never really went away, but it certainly is having a moment. I mean, it
yeah,
is this year alone. I mean, and I just started like reading and reviewing horror seriously for like it's got to be almost like a year and a half now. I mean, it has just been a steady influx of new and interesting points of view on different things like I never even considered. I mean, it's just been one after the other.
yeah. It seems like every publisher is now opening more horror dedicated imprints,
Yeah.
and it's just becoming clearer and clearer that has always been, a reliable genre. And I feel like, yeah, like you were saying, especially in the film world, it's always like Hollywood always acts so surprised when
Yeah.
a horror movie is a hit at the box office.
I
Like
know.
we have at least one a month. What are we talking about? Like
I know.
there are always hits. But yeah, it's been interesting now coming from the film and TV world into the publishing world, and then that also brings me back into film and
Yeah.
TV to have different conversations about adaptation. Yeah,
The lifespan of Curse of the Reaper, man. Like I think about that on a daily, not a daily, like a weekly basis. Like I think about that and I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean,
I'll have to like I have under my bed here like all of my old notebooks from grad school, so I'll have to at some point post on Instagram like a picture of like a notebook page from like 2010 of me like I think there's a page where I'm like, I gotta give him a unique weapon. What about a rusty chain? Like literally the development that has gone on for the last over a decade of that.
I know. It
But
is
yeah,
insane.
everything. Yeah, I was just listening to CJ Lead on Talking Scared talk about how long American Rapture was with
Yeah.
her, and I think it's not uncommon for certain stories to just take the time they take to manifest in whatever form they do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's it's insane to think about logically, but I mean, like you said, whatever it takes to get it wherever it needs to be and exist in its best shape, I mean, time's not real, like we mentioned.
Yes.
So ever since COVID, time is definitely not real.
Yeah.
And speaking of horror imprint or imprints, big imprints, or big publishers wanting to do horror imprints, what can you say about the things that you were working on? Because I know you just announced a new novel,
Yes.
like a few weeks ago, but I don't know what else you have going on. I don't know what you're allowed to say, so I don't want to get you in
Yes.
trouble.
I'll start with that because I can say, yeah, it's my next novel will be out in fall 2025. That's with Poison Pen Press. They're a fantastic thriller, horror, mystery imprint of source books. Super excited for that one. It's called Breathe In, Bleed Out,
I
and
love
it
that
is
title
about
so much. I love
it's
it.
I can't take credit. It had a different working title, and that was one of the first big green flags of working with Poison Pen, as they have an amazing marketing team and came up with a bunch of possible titles, and that was the winner. But yeah, it's about a group of friends who go to this spiritual healing retreat outside of Joshua Tree, and fortunately, there's a mysterious slasher picking them off and intent on killing their vibes. So that one is it's fun because it's much more murder mystery,
Yeah.
but with real gnarly slasher kills as I want to do. And yeah, my editor really embraced that and wanted me to do what I do. And yeah, and then yeah, I have some shorter fiction coming. I'm in the Punk Goes Horror
I'm so,
anthology.
so excited for that one. Oh my God.
Really psyched. William Sterling editing with Christina Osborne's Trueborn Press. publishing it, and I think that's coming out in March. And then I have a couple other maybe anthologies that I can't talk about yet that haven't been announced. But yeah, it's always weird the process of writing, especially if you're trying to do a book a year. Like I'm now like promoting Candy Cain Kills Again, doing edits on Breathe In, Bleed Out,
Yeah.
outlining and starting to write the next book that will hopefully be 2026. And then doing shorts in between, and then also on the film and TV side, I'm mostly focused on using my fiction to set up adaptations. I'm not really writing spec scripts or anything anymore.
I gotcha.
Um, yeah, it's just been kind of working with producers and uh, I do have a script adaptation of Candy King Kills that we're now shopping and looking for directors for. So it's been fun to kind of just have a foot in all of those worlds and
Yeah.
always be thinking about the next scary story.
Yeah. It's so like it sounds so incredibly busy and like I just can't imagine how you keep it all straight. Like I talked to Philip Fracassi about this because he's somebody who's like going through the adaptation process right now in addition to much like you writing still like it's just I imagine it's so much to, keep organized in your brain, from a
Yeah,
creative standpoint and then like like the obvious logical like kind of business standpoint.
yes, it is. Especially now, teaching full time at ASU, it's been, always a balancing act. And luckily, like I'm very much a morning writer, so it's just a
Yeah.
matter of like making sure I wake up super early and get my coffee and writing time in before moving on to other work. But it is a good problem to have. I feel like I definitely can't complain that, I have to write my books before I go teach screenwriting and screen horror movies for my students. Like, woe is me.
Yeah, no, I get it. How long have you been teaching, by the way?
So when I was in LA, I was in LA for 10 years and I had taught part-time at a handful of different universities there, but I just last year moved to Arizona
Yeah.
to teach like full-time at ASU Film School. So this is my second academic year of teaching like a full course load and doing other kind of work within the school on top of that. But it's great. I love teaching so much. I love getting to be with students who are just still discovering classic movies and getting to show
Yeah.
them to them and to talk story with them all day and hear what's influencing them, especially like when they discover classics. Like yeah, screening the thing tonight's going to be very fun. But many of them already told me like, oh, I love the thing. I can't wait to see it. And I'm like, I love that some of these movies just keep
Yeah.
reoccurring for every
Persisting.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to ask, because my mom was a teacher and I'm just so curious, like, do you find that your teaching journey has affected how you write or like how you approach writing or like what's that relationship been like?
Yeah, I think it definitely it can't help but kind of just like when I'm talking especially about story structure in a workshop, like it just gets more and more ingrained in me.
Hmm.
And all the things that I am preaching, like I can't help like when I sit down at the page, I'm like, gotta practice what I preach here. And it's I think it helps that I'm teaching screenwriting, but most of my writing now is books and short stories.
Yeah.
I think it would be hard to be doing the same format over and over.
Yeah.
So the story elements are the same, but then I get to do fun lessons like I did on Halloween about the difference between screenwriting and fiction writing, and read a sample of my book and show a film clip and talk about that process from the different perspectives. It's really fun.
Yeah, that's neat. I think it's just so interesting, like you said, it's almost like a weird sense of accountability. Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk kind of thing.
Yep.
So it's always something that interests me. But man, I'm really, really excited for everybody to get their hands on Candy Cane Kills again. There's another part of that book that I really love is that you put a basically like a previously on
Yes.
section that brings you up to speed because it has been a full year since I read Candy Cane Kills. So
Yep.
I any authors everywhere, like please take notes because God is that helpful.
Yeah, that was big shout out as I shouted around the acknowledgments, but
Yeah.
Stephanie from Books in the Freezer had tweeted that request in general of like, I wish there was a previously on section for sequel books. And I was like, that's a very good point. And if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna have fun with it. It's
I was about to
it's
say,
not
and you
gonna.
made yours rhyme, so bonus points to Brian.
It really
Oh,
is, yeah, you got to think about, okay, what are the bare bones that are most important to remember here? And also, remind them of like, what were the kills in the first book? It's part of,
some of them are hard to forget. Like to be fair, there's like a window scene that is very hard for me to forget.
that's
But
gnarly. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But man, no, I'm just very excited for everybody to experience the Candy Cane Kills joy all over again. Because I mean, it was super cool last year to see it kind of grow, and especially around Christmas. Like I think everybody got that like as a Christmas present, and like all of the Christmas tree pictures and everything else. Like it was super cool. So I'm expecting something similar again this year, but
Thank
I'm really
you.
really looking forward to it. For
I'm
you.
so, yeah, grateful for the folks on Bookstagram are just wickedly talented and wonderful with with all the themed book photographs and
Yeah.
stagings, and some people did cosplay images last year with Candy Cane. I'm just like, God bless this community of people who find this murderous character as endearing as I do.
No, and like I forget the artist's name, but whoever illustrated her, I remember when you got that, that was super cool to see,
Yeah.
that come to
That
life in a way.
that's on my wall here.
Yeah.
Jack Vines at Ghoulish Portal on Instagram. I was like blown away, and that was right after the book came out, so I didn't want to share it too much because it is a
Yeah.
little bit of a spoiler that early in the book release. But then by the time book two came around, I was like, we're putting her on the cover, but we're not playing coy anymore. But yeah,
No, she's
that.
on a prayer card too.
Yeah,
I
my
cannot
mom didn't love that.
I can't tell you how tempted I am to slip that into like one of my grandparents' presents just to see what would happen, just to
Oh my
see
God.
who's this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, just pray.
Oh man, Brian. Well, thank you so so much for your time. I want to ask you one last parting question. Like what are you reading right now, and are you watching anything right now? Especially since I know you're about to go watch The Thing, but on
Yes.
TV or movies in general. Like I just watched The Substance this weekend, and so like I want to talk to everybody about The Substance too.
I need to go see it. I'm still finishing up the Love is Blind reunion episode.
I need to get caught up. Oh my God,
I
it is such my like guilty pleasure. I need to watch it.
know. But my girlfriend and I have been just like binging horror franchises recently, of
Yeah.
revisiting them. So we're currently doing Halloween. Uh, those this that franchise is way more boring than I remembered. I have to say, it's why I remember that Michael's my least favorite. But yeah, and then reading, I just actually just got my copy. I blurbed a book called Saturday Fright at the Movies by Amanda Cecilia Lang, I want to say is her last name. It's three names, so I need to make sure I get it right. Um, yes, Amanda Cecilia Lang. It's super fun collection of short stories that are all kind of like midnight movie, B horror fun. Um,
That sounds really good.
and yeah, it's a good one from Dark Matter. And yeah, always, I think my next read is going to be Todd Kiesling's new book. No, mostly
Nice.
nowadays, like blurb books are the top kind of priority, which again is a privilege to be able to be in a position where I get to read the advanced work of some of my fellow amazing authors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Back to the Halloween franchise just for like 2 seconds. I
Oh,
had to go on a
please.
work trip like 2 weeks ago and I was sick. So like I got to like the hotel and I like went to Walgreens, bought like some medicine, just like knocked out at 5 p.m. and I left the TV on. And like when I fell asleep, it was Friday the 13th. But I woke up to Rob Zombie's Halloween on and I had never seen it. And I was like, I was so confused. I was like, what is
No.
happening? That felt like a fever dream, and that's like my most recent encounter with Halloween.
Yeah, that was actually the one we just watched. We got all the way up to the zombie Halloween, and I think we decided we're gonna skip his Halloween 2, which I just, I don't know, man. To each their own. It's not
Yeah.
my vibe. I'm a Halloween Resurrection defender through and through. The Busta Rhymes one, because it is absurd and over the top, and that's more fun to me.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you there. I mean, I didn't finish it. I think I just turned the TV off and like went to bed. But it was just like, you know
Yeah.
how like whenever you wake up from cold medicine, you're like, what year is it? And then like imagine Rob Zombie's Halloween isn't your face. It's just a terrible
No,
experience.
sounds like a nightmare.
It's like Nickelback's playing in the background and you don't know what's going on. Oh man. Thank you so so much, Brian. It is always a blast to get to chat with you. And I hope that I can chat with you some more whenever your full-length novel gets a little bit closer. I know it's gonna be like a full year, but yeah, no, I'm super excited for everything else that you have coming out and all the things that you can't talk about yet equally. All those little short things. But yeah, no, thank you so much, Brian, for your time.
Thank you, and it's always a treat. Can't wait to hang again soon.
Anytime.